Welcome back to Her Per Hooray, a weekly worldwide transmission. I'm your host, Jason Rossi. We are simulcasting on RossiReptiles.com, Buzzsprout, and don't forget to subscribe and download us on iTunes. This week's featured breeder of the week has informed me on multiple issues. Pretty sure he is unaware that I learned how to safely ship a reptile from watching his step-by-step video. In September 2011, they suffered from a horrific tragedy when their facility burned down. The outpour of support from the reptile community was touching, and we're here to get an update and see what's going on since then. I'm pleased with Robyn Markland on Her Per Hooray from Pro Exotic. Robyn, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Jason. It's good to be here.
Awesome. Well, again, I appreciate you taking time out of your very busy schedule and coming out here and talking with us.
No problem. Happy to be here. The last couple of weeks have been really nutty. I'm trying to get kind of calmed down this week. We had the Pomona show 2 weeks ago, and then, of course, the big Daytona show this past weekend. So it's been kind of running me ragged the past couple of weeks, but I'm glad to be back home and trying to settle into a regular schedule again.
Awesome, man. Well, we appreciate it, and we know you got a little bug. So how did the Reptile report come about?
The Reptile report was something that I've been tossing around in my brain for a couple of years. We launched it in February of 2012 here, so just earlier this year. But, I recognize that the reptile industry revolves a lot around forums, a lot of online community, in general forums, and then in, more particular, species forums, frog forums, and ball python specific forums, chameleon forums, that kind of thing. So I recognize that a lot of business was done there and a lot of community interaction happened there, but there was just not enough hours in the day for me to try and keep up with everything going on what I thought was, at least 12 or 15 different forums. So I was trying to come up with this idea of how I could stay current across more forums and maybe in less time. So Chad and I kind of brainstormed it out, and we came up with this idea of maybe it becomes a news feed of sort where we pay editors to actually go to forums and monitor the forums for, interesting discussion, great threads, new hatchlings, new breedings, industry buzz and happenings across, all kinds of different species. And we have editors pull that content into one source. The idea was that I personally would be able to stay more current with the industry. Chad then took it a step further and said, why does it have to be just for you? Why not make it available for everybody? And that seemed kind of like an obvious moment. And so we thought, well, yeah, that's pretty genius. What if we make it into, like an actual website that people could access and consume the highlights and buzz of the industry that way? So we started tackling it. What I learned was there's more than 15 forums. There's actually about 100 different forums that we've found so far. So we're actually pulling every day from 100 different reptile, amphibian, and invert forums, all the highlights and interesting things, putting them into categories on the Reptile report. And boy, now at this point, instead of staying current with just 2 or 3 forums, which was my past experience, I'm current and active and participating in over 40 forums every single week myself. So it's been a tremendous boon to help me stay better in touch with the industry and keep up with things that are happening. And the site itself has grown really well, and it's been super well received by all different segments of the industry, both hobbyists and business folks and business owners, breeders, and that kind of thing. So it kind of started out of this idea of how can Robyn stay better in touch with the industry, and instead blossomed into how can everybody stay better in touch with the industry. And I'm really excited with the site, and I'm really pleased with how it's come out.
Yeah, man, that thing has a lot of knowledge on it. Just a full
sure does. It sure does. We're over, like I said, we started in February, and there's over, I think there's something like 12,000 items posted on the Reptile report, which is, 12,000 links to, again, the threads and discussions and across all the different species of both reptile, amphibian, and invert type stuff. So it's just jam-packed with stuff, and it's been a really fascinating experience to learn about a lot of segments of the industry that I just wasn't plugged into before. Amphibian stuff, invert stuff. I was looking at chameleon stuff today. It was just blowing my mind. And I didn't have an opportunity to be in touch with that type of stuff, those species and that content before. But with Reptile Report, I'm able to, and I couldn't be happier. I'm really stoked about being out plugged into everything.
Yeah, it's really awesome to see that happening for you, man. So yeah, so what is it about the Bolens python that makes it your favorite? I saw that was your favorite snakes.
Yeah, that's long been a favorite. We've worked with Bolens for a long time. I think we got our first ones maybe 1996. It was in the mid-90s there. We got some babies, some captive born babies that, came from a wild-caught female that was gravid. And so I've worked with them for a long time. We've tried to breed them for that entire period. It's been not quite 20 years on trying to breed them, but certainly well over 15 years. And, along with everybody else, we've had, very little success, absolutely zero success getting eggs. We were able to make some success with, getting compatible pairs, getting males to court females, getting great copulations that lasted for hours and hours. I can get females to cycle and grow follicles and do everything up to the egg shelling process, but we can never get over that hump. And I think that big mystery on what's missing there, why it's so difficult to breed those, I think that's part of the appeal for me. But that animal, as a standalone species, I'm just captivated by it. It's a big snake. A lot of our adults were 12, 13 foot plus, but not with like a Burmese girth to it. But I mean, the big females might have been a good 4 inches plus in diameter. So it was a larger snake. So it was very weighty, and it had the mass to it, which I thought was neat. The color of the animal, the iridescence of the black, has always captivated me visually. It's just an unbelievably beautiful animal, and the head as well has such beautiful color, and I want to say texture. There's not actually texture to the scales, but visually they look like they have depth. It almost looks like the head is made of felt, and I've always been fascinated by that. The temperament is just fantastic. It's an inquisitive animal, never been aggressive, easy to handle. I mean, I've handled Bolens with 6-year-old kids, and had complete confidence in that animal. So it's a really great handling animal. We've spent so much time with them, watching behavior and changing with different setups. And I've seen other people do some very extravagant setups. I've seen Stan Chiris do what must have been nearly a 40-foot long cage in his attempt to try and solve the riddle of the breeding Bolens. So the challenge of the breeding aspect and then the visual beauty of the species, I think together that just makes such an intriguing package for that snake. It has always been my favorite snake, and it's one that I would like to have for the future. We don't have any snakes on hand really right now, but for the future I would like to get in back into Bolens, not necessarily on a breeding program. That wouldn't be my motivation, but I would love to have a couple of animals and just have them on display. I mean, I just don't think it gets a lot better than a visual Bolens as far as a visual type setup. They're just an outstanding species. So yeah, I've always been fascinated with those guys.
Awesome. So let's go back to the tragedy that no one wishes upon anyone. Why don't you tell our listeners about the facility fire at Pro Exotics?
Yeah, it was at the end of September 2011, early in the morning, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. Our facility here in Littleton, Colorado, caught fire, and pretty much got wiped out. We had a 10,000 square foot facility. The bulk of that housed our offices and our snake collection, and then inventory and dry goods and supplies and other stuff like that. but our snake collection was in that particular building. We're almost here a year later. Time certainly goes by quickly, but it's almost been a year, and we just had this discussion in Daytona, Chad and I. Investigators are still haven't come up with a final determination on what caused the fire specifically to place, to point a finger and say this is what happened. We do know it was electrical in nature. It was in a particular area of racks, and there was, there's heat cable there, there's thermostats there, there's power strips there, there's, timers there, a lot of different electrical components there. Like I said, they haven't decided what individual component may have sparked it off and started the fire. I don't know that they'll ever get to that point. It was such a mess and such a jumbled, melted mass of caging that, I don't know how they would be able to approach singling out one spark point, so to speak. But we do know it was electrical in nature. So back then, in September on that day, I got a call that, the alarm system had gone off, and they'd sent police and fire to the facility, and they called me and said, there's some smoke coming out of the building. So I got up, and it took me about 15 minutes to get to the shop, and there was a bunch of fire trucks there, and the building was indeed on fire. Sorry, I'm getting over my Daytona illness. That day, certainly it changed our entire future. We did lose all of our snakes. There's about 2,500 animals, everything from babies up to adults, all our breeding stock, ball pythons, the Bolens that I mentioned, a handful of boas. We did a few different colubrid species, some rat snakes. All of that was lost to the fire, and the building had burned for 5 or 6 hours before they were even able to get in there. So, we didn't have the opportunity to try and, rush in and try and pull stuff out. That wasn't the circumstance. We did find some live animals after they'd be able to put the fire out. So one large boa, so a few rat snakes that had been, on like the lower levels of caging where the fire wasn't as intense, and they had, jumped in their water bowls and it hid in there. And so we had some hope about, maybe there's, these 7 or 8 animals that might pull through. But within 3 weeks or so after the fire, all those animals had succumbed to respiratory illness and issues because the smoke was so heavy and black. A lot of the caging and stuff is all plastic-based. So all of that melting down, it was just a thick, black, acrid smoke. And, they had been completely filled inside the facility. So all those animals ended up passing that had actually made it through the fire process. At this point, we haven't replaced anything. People ask me all the time if we're going to rebuild the collection, and that's not in the cards for us at this point. We want it to continue to be in the reptile industry, and we have other businesses that do that. Our SHIPYOU Reptiles, Pro Exotics was primarily a snake breeder, and then we did lizards, monitor species as well. But we did a handful of dry goods, stuff like our temp guns, heat tape, thermostats, things like that. So we've decided going forward to concentrate on those other aspects of the business so we can still stay in the reptile industry. But it took us 20 years to build up our collection to the point where we were at last year. And I'm not looking to spend another 20 years to try and recreate it. I don't know that I have the willpower to do that. Chad is still to this day, I think, pretty heartbroken about the loss. And we had specific tasks after the fire, different responsibilities to try and move forward after such a catastrophe. And the animal side of things, I just wasn't down for. I couldn't do those things. So Chad ended up doing them, which would be inventorying literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dead animals. And I think that has affected him on a real deep level and on a long-term basis. And, for insurance purposes and investigation purposes and stuff, we had to go through everything, the caging and the dry goods and, big melted piles of temp guns and things like that. We also had to go through whatever snakes were identifiable in the building. And so, you had a lot of these charred and burnt bodies that we had to inventory and count and everything else. And like I said, I couldn't do that. I couldn't bring myself to face that. And so Chad got that task, and I think it certainly has affected him. So mentally, I don't think he's ready to, try and keep snakes again. And we're trying to stay focused on these other businesses so we can still be in the reptile industry. But at this point, I don't think the future is in live reptile breeding for us. That's not. We did that for 20 years, and it was amazing time. And I think we did some really awesome stuff, and we worked with incredible animals. But I think where we're at personally, any snakes that we do, things like the Bolens, pythons, something like that, is strictly going to be for a personal enjoyment, the passion of keeping the animals. I'm not going to have any breeding focus. I'm not going to be worried about clutches or counts or sales or production for this season. I'm not going to worry about any of those kind of things. I'm looking to keep a handful of species and just do it for the pure enjoyment of it, and that's going to be my future on the snake side, I think.
Yeah, if I can remember one thing is about your comments in the forums, how positive you stayed through that whole thing. It was just amazing how you did that, man. I don't know how you did it, but you did it and you pulled it off, and you're here to tell us.
Yeah, there's a couple dark days. Well, there's a bunch of those, really. But we had an amazing outpouring of support from the reptile community, something that I had never seen up to that point. And the strength that I found in other people in the industry, both hobbyists and business folks, breeders and stuff, the strength that I found from them really helped me get through the hardest times. Because it was very difficult to see your hard work taken away in literally an instant. And then the loss of the animals themselves is very, very difficult to deal with. But at the same time, I always thought it's important to have perspective about everything in your life. And while this experience and this burden is particularly heavy for me, other folks in the reptile industry or outside of the reptile industry, and somebody that just lives right down the street from me, other folks have heavier burdens that they have to carry, and they have harder and more difficult trauma to get through. So while I was certainly struggling at times to deal with our situation, the idea that there's other people dealing with harder things gave me perspective to be grateful for what I had and be grateful for the support that I had from the community, and to tangent off of it a little bit, that was spotlighted again very recently when, Sean Bradley from Exotics by Nature, if folks aren't aware, he had a fall over the 4th of July. And Sean Bradley is a well-known and respected snake breeder, much like we were in the industry. But he had a fall on the 4th of July, and now he's paralyzed. He broke his back. He's going to be paralyzed for the rest of his life. He also has maintained a very positive attitude. And I suppose in situations where you go through this trauma, you can either go cry in the corner or you can, keep your head up and take a breath and move forward. And I think most of us will move forward. And so when I see Sean dealing with his injury and his accident, to me, losing my animals was very traumatic. But I didn't lose my home. I didn't lose my life. I didn't, nobody in my family was hurt. Nobody on my staff was hurt. And so I feel very fortunate in those respects. And I look at something that's happened to Sean that is going to affect him for the rest of his life. And to me, that enforces that perspective of, actually, I'm really a fortunate guy. And it turns out to be a very fortunate situation, because it could have been so much worse than it was. So let's take that perspective, and let me be very grateful for what we have and being able to move through it. And I have this opportunity to move forward and do these other things. That's awesome. I'm really grateful for that. And I won't ever take that for granted, because I do know that other people, including Sean, are going through things much more difficult than what I went through. So I have a great appreciation and understanding and respect for folks like that. And I will always retain the perspective of, no matter how hard or difficult my situation was, there's always somebody that's had it much, much worse. So I'm going to do my best to stay positive and move forward, because that's what I have to do.
That's big, man. But people can help by purchasing your Pro Exotics What the Shit Dwayne t-shirt, right?
Yeah. We still actually, we did a fundraising shirt after the fire, kind of based on an internet meme that came up on our site. And I still have a handful of those available. So, yeah, you can go to the ProExotics.com site and pick up your What the Shit Dwayne shirts. Those will be available until they're all gone. And then, like I said, there's a few in a few different sizes available still.
So how did the Pro Exotic Temp Gun come about?
The Temp Gun was a product we started back in the mid-'90s. It was my first Temp Gun I actually bought from Tracy Barker at VPI. It was a Raytech back in the mid-'90s there. And back at that time, I think they were like $450 or $499, some crazy amount. But it's a infrared thermometer that will read surface temperatures, without touching them. It's non-contact. And I thought, well, that's amazing. That could be great for all kinds of reptile applications. And so we got, I think I actually bought 2 of those $500 units. And it was a really awesome tool. And I thought, Chad and I both have always been very entrepreneurial. So no matter what our business status is, we're always looking for, is there opportunity there is this a product that the industry needs, or is this a product that the market needs? And we always look at it from an entrepreneurial standpoint. So I thought, this is an amazing product. I really like it. $500 is way too much. But a couple of years later, you started seeing some less expensive units, and technology got more and more affordable. And long story short, we ended up sourcing it out of China. They have these factories that were doing this pretty inexpensive infrared technology manufacturing. So we designed a unit, and we actually purchased a preset unit they already had. Was our first attempt at it. Then eventually we designed our own units. And then I started, manufacturing them for Pro Exotics and for, TempGun.com. So we started TempGun.com site, and we started selling not just to reptile folks, but to radio control hobby, home inspection, mechanical, and these other various industries. But I was able to get this Temp Gun, the original one I bought for $500. I was able to get one that I could actually sell for $25. And I thought, well, if you could do that, that's a price point that really would make a difference, because every hobbyist in reptiles could make that type of a purchase. Not everybody can afford a $500 Temp Gun, but a $25 Temp Gun, that's within the reach of just about everybody. And I recognized it was such an important tool for setting up caging, incubation, all the various different temperatures are related to the reptile hobby: cool spots, hot spots, water temps, incubation temps, basking temps, substrate temps. It had so many applications. So I still, to this day, I think it's the single best tool for reptile husbandry. There's a bunch of different units on the market now, and lots of units at that lower price point. But we certainly have a very popular unit in the reptile world and in the RC world, and we've done really well with those over the past 15 years or so. And that is something we'll continue to do for the future. I'm actually in kind of a holding pattern on temp guns. I talk about it all the time at the shop because we actually lost the bulk of our stock in the fire of last September. So I lost tens of thousands of units. We did have insurance on our building and our stock, but it was limited. You never anticipate having such a crazy event. So we only have about 20% coverage of our loss. So it's important that we try to maximize that 20%. And here we are a year later, and we still are waiting for insurance to try and come through. That's its own frustrating story, but part of that thing I'm desperately waiting on is so I can do a new run of temp guns, because I'm not able to fill orders for our different dealers and sellers, and I can't sell them online very well because I don't have our P1 unit is our most popular unit, and I just don't have any more left. And so I'd love to get insurance to come through. That'd be fantastic, number one. And number two is one of the first things I'd like to do is go ahead and order some new temp guns, because, again, I'm such a big believer in that tool in the reptile world, and I still do want to be, a significant temp gun seller in the reptile market. But I'm in a bit of a holding pattern right now, but I think temp guns are going to be in our long-term future for quite some time.
I'm pretty sure every reptile enthusiast has a temp gun now, thanks to you.
It seems like it's pretty well established in the hobby for sure. 10, 12 years ago, it was much more unusual to see. But again, once you have a unit at like a $25 price point, most folks can have access to that. And at this point, most folks can appreciate the kind of accuracy and temperature measurement that the temp gun brings to the table, and see it as a valuable tool. So yeah, there's certainly a ton of them out there. It's great to see.
So why don't you tell us about your awesome shipping service, SHIPYOU Reptiles?
SHIPYOU Reptiles, we started a few years ago. Kind of another entrepreneurial spirit type of a thing. We saw this need to obviously ship reptiles in the industry. Breeders and sellers, hobbyists are either selling each other reptiles or they're trading reptiles, or a lot of times they're moving and need to transport. So we saw a need for a way that made shipping easier and, if at all possible, more affordable. And we put together this, the site SHIPYOUReptiles.com. It's basically an online shipping interface, and we sell the packaging and the boxing and insulated boxes and bags and deli cups and heat packs and all that kind of stuff that goes with it. But it's a site where you can go and book, your shipment. You book it from your place across the country to your customer's place or your buddy's place, or somebody you're trading with, or whether you're moving or what have you. And you can book it on the site. It's a FedEx service, so we provide you with a FedEx label, and FedEx would then transport your animals through the priority overnight service. It goes out one afternoon and then arrives the following morning, and typically by 10:30. It's a pretty amazing, logistically I think it's a really amazing system, how they can take a package from northwest Denver, Colorado, and deliver it to a house in Poughkeepsie, New York, less than 18 hours later. That's pretty fascinating to me from a behind-the-scenes logistical standpoint. But they do a great job, and we help folks book those shipments on our site. We also offer a 20% discount to start, so you could save some money as well. And then this past year, we've also instituted live arrival guarantees, so you can insure the animal both for on-time and live arrival, which is something that FedEx and UPS don't offer to reptile shippers. So, we bring a couple other benefits and value aspects to the situation, and it's been a real big success. I think, we're certainly the industry a leader and setting the standard in reptile shipping. And I get a ton of good feedback from folks that are appreciative of an easy and reliable way, an affordable way to book their reptile shipments. Now, when I talk to people outside the industry, they think they always think you're kind of nutty because you work with reptiles anyways. It's kind of an odd thing. But they think I'm even odder because I have a reptile shipping business. They don't even grasp the idea that this kind of thing can exist, much less just travel through, say, the FedEx system. So when I travel and talk to folks in airports or on vacation or whatever it might be, I say, I'm a reptile shipper, and they say, boy, that's really fascinating. When I tell them that we're doing hundreds and hundreds of shipments a week, maybe 1,000 shipments a week, at that point their minds are just blown, period, because people have no idea of the vitality of the reptile industry itself. But I guess the normal person would have never considered that snake keepers are shipping snakes to and from each other. It's kind of certainly a niche thing. For us in the reptile industry, it seems like everyday business, but it certainly is a little bit odd to folks in general. But I think we do a real professional execution, for reptile shipping, and it keeps folks doing it safely and responsibly. And I think that also is going to contribute to the long-term success of not just Shipper Reptiles, but the reptile hobby as a whole.
How about your all-pro media works? You guys making blockbuster films next, or what?
No, All Pro Media Works is a business that we did. We do some business with a buddy of mine, Lee McCormack, who is at this point deeply involved for the past few years in the shipping business, Ship Your Reptiles, and also in the Reptile Report. But Lee is actually a world-class mountain bike coach. He trains mountain bike racers and athletes, as well as he does clinics and teaches regular folks how to be better bikers. And he's very well known for this, and he has a whole business that exists on the internet. It's actually called LeeLikesBikes.com if you want to check it out. But so Lee was doing this business with us, and I also am a biker, and I love to do biking kind of stuff, bicycle type stuff, BMX, mountain bike, kind of anything with two wheels I'm down for. And Lee had ended up writing a pro BMX skills manual for BMX racing. And he's an excellent writer and has done a number of fantastic books. So he did this BMX book project called Pro BMX Skills, and he needed a publisher. And, of course, me and Chad immediately said, hey, how about us? We'll make a company, we'll do the whole thing, the whole entrepreneurial thing. So we created this All Pro Media Works business specifically in order to publish the Pro BMX Skills book. And then, we have a couple other projects that we dabble with as well. So I'm not going to make an empire out of that, but I do get a lot of thrill out of the Pro BMX Skills book itself, and then selling that and distributing that, as a publisher. It's kind of a non-reptile thing, but it's still a lot of fun.
Awesome. So you also do some jiu-jitsu, I see.
I do. I started training jiu-jitsu and grappling back in the 90s. I don't do so much anymore. I only train a few times a year at this point. But I've trained on and off for a long time. And, yes, I enjoy jiu-jitsu very much. I still like watching all the MMA stuff. And, my regular workout spot, I'm doing a lot of CrossFit now. They also have a jiu-jitsu setup. And so sometimes I'll drop in on the class, but a lot of times I'll sit and just watch the class. And at this point, I'm not going to win any world championships by any means, but I can always drop in, and there's always a base level of skill that I can tap into and make the most use of.
I trained for 3 months, man, and I'll tell you what, rolling for 5 minutes, man, woo, that'll wear you out real quick.
It really will. It's a great workout, and it's a lot of fun. It gets to the point where if you really want to be good at it, like anything else, you have to commit and really train and regularly practice to have great timing and great cardio and great technical skills. So, like I said, I've got my go-to stuff that I can use, and I'll drop into classes and surprise a few folks once in a while. But I think my great jiu-jitsu days are probably in my 30s, and so that's going to be behind me at this point.
All right, so I still got a few years. Okay, that's good to know. So how was Daytona, other than the bug that you caught?
Yeah, I always seem to get sick after I travel. I have a love-hate relationship with shows. It's not so bad anymore because we don't do animal stuff at shows anymore. We used to haul snakes and lizards and stuff to the show to sell. And coming from Colorado, we have to fly everywhere. And the stress of taking the animals always just built up on me and drug me down. So I still have some of that reflexive stress of the show, even at this point. We're doing shipping and, I'm handing out flyers for the Reptile Report. It's really executionally very easy. But I do tend to stress about it, and I want the show to go really well. And I think that compounded with the travel and exposure to tens of thousands of other people, it always seems to get me sick and, give me a bug. So that part was a bummer. I'm recovering. I'm actually trying to get better as quickly as I can because my bike season is also ending soon here in Colorado. I'm trying to get up to Winter Park and do more downhill biking before the season's up at the end of September. So hopefully I'll be better than enough this weekend to go biking. But the Daytona show, really interesting show at this point. It's always been the premier show of the year, biggest show in the world kind of a reputation. It's not that anymore. It's not the biggest show in the world anymore. It's still a significant show, and it still is a very professional show. I've been to some other shows that they have more of a local type feel to them, including straight up local shows here in Denver. And the Daytona is always a step above that. It's a very professional, executional feel to it, and it's always great to go and see a group of your peers in the industry that are always going to be down at the show. See guys like Albie, John's Jungle I spent some time with, and then there's and you see Kevin and Ralph, even though they haven't been lately, but it's great to see that regular group of people. And then there's also a whole new generation. At this point, we've been around long enough that there's a whole new generation of breeders at the shows, and that's been really fascinating to me. I see guys like Sloan Reptiles and Ben Rennick and some of these younger guys. I think is really fascinating. And of course, I talked to Bob Applegate the other day, and comparatively, I suppose he's seen 4 or 5 generations of people come through the industry and mature on. So that's kind of funny. Again, going back to perspective, but the show. The vendor count, I think, was probably down again this year. Still a big room and lots of stuff to see. The displays, the vendor booths, I thought were up. I was really impressed. If you had a chance to see the Zoomed booth or the ExoTerra booth, some of the other caging booths, and some of the other live animal booths, boy, some people are putting a lot of money into their setups and displays. That's really impressive. I was really blown away by some of the setups. ExoTerra literally had a big giant space that they decked out with, and it made it look almost like the coolest reptile living room you'd ever seen. It had thick carpet padding, had like couches and places to sit, and it had just a bunch of different, very extravagant, terrariums and displays. I was really blown away by that, and I was impressed by that aspect. The crowd seemed to be down a bit again this year. The past few years it seemed to be kind of tapering as the show kind of evolves. But Saturday I thought was incredibly strong, and I heard really some great feedback from vendors and other folks doing the show. They said Saturday was just phenomenal. So the crowd might have been a little bit lighter, but they were very engaged and apparently were purchasing. and seemed to be a very strong and productive type of a crowd. So overall I thought the weekend was actually really good, and I had a good time being at the show. As usual, a lot of times when you vend, you don't get much time to walk around the show. It's been years and years and years since I've had a chance to just browse the show booth to booth. I do miss that kind of an experience. I ran around a bunch of times to try and cover as much ground as I could. But yeah, I certainly would have liked to be able to browse booth to booth and just see all the great animals. And there's a lot of neat products that folks are coming out with. And it'd be nice to casually consume it on kind of a slow walking type pace instead of always running spot to spot. But from the feedback and stuff that I got at the show, I thought it went really well, and we had a good productive show. We shipped reptiles out and dry goods out from Daytona, and we had great success with that again. So I was happy about that. And I think Wayne announced that he was doing a Daytona show for 2013 and 2014. He just booked the facility again for the next 2 years. So there certainly will be another Daytona show. And from talking to different breeders about sales and stuff, I think there's certainly going to be a lot of breeders that are going to come back and display a bunch of great new animals.
Well, it sounds like a blast. I'll have to try to make it to Florida sometime and check it out.
It was. If you've never been to Daytona, you should go at least once, for sure. I mean, it's a show unlike any other. We've been to Tinley and Anaheim and all the different NARBC shows, and we've done the super shows now and local shows. And I get feedback on East Coast shows, White Plains and Hamburg and different shows. But I think Daytona is unique to itself, much like I think Tinley Park is unique to itself, and also an amazing and excellent show. And that'll be the next big one that we go to in October, and I'm looking forward to that as well. But Daytona is definitely a great experience, and I do think serious reptile folks should definitely try and get down there and go to the show and make an appearance and check out all the great vendors and the great animals and stuff that are there.
Awesome. So we're going to switch up speeds now. So what do you think that we, the Herp Nation, need to do to combat all of these exotic bands coming down on us, it seems, constantly?
Yeah, it's a daunting thing and a bit discouraging. I think a united front is important. I think it's important that everybody's on the same page, and I think it's important that everybody is supportive. So, supporting groups like USARK, I think, is crucial to our long-term success. A lot of the bans and legislation are really based on a lot of ignorance, and that's unfortunate. A lot of the folks that are in position to make rules and laws and legislation are not very educated and hip to the real realities of reptiles. So I think the education, both on the legislative side and the public side, is going to be super important. And so I think our best bet is supporting groups like USARK to try and essentially play this game of the legislative process. I know a lot of folks are more idealistic about what they want to get or achieve or demand, and boy, it just doesn't seem to work in any kind of idealistic way. The system is very entrenched, and it functions in very particular ways. So I think we have to learn to play the game as best we can in order to produce the result that we want. And I think USARK is doing a strong job of it. We've certainly had some hits and losses, in the industry in the past year or two with different bans and, Lacey Act things and, shipping berms and things across state lines. And those rulings and laws seem very lunk-headed and a completely backward way to address the issue. But hopefully with more time and more education, we can make some progress and get those things not just prevented in the future, but also turned around and rectified.
Well, that was a great answer. So is there anything you'd like to add in closing before we wrap this up?
I suppose just to say that, I started in the reptile business over 20 years ago, and getting back to that idea of perspective and being grateful, I'm really grateful to be in this business. I really do love the industry. I have a passion for the animals and the business itself. I really enjoy being involved in the reptile industry and being involved with the people in the industry. And I'm just really grateful for all that it has contributed to my life. It's pretty awesome when you step back and look at it. And I know a lot of other people in the industry, again, folks like Bob Applegate or Dave Barker. I mean, they've been around for 3 times as long as I have, and I just think that's so amazing. That's so awesome, and I really respect that. And I talked to my partner Chad the other day, and I thought, I said, 40 years from now, we're still going to be in the reptile industry, and we agreed, and indeed, that's where we want to be. I think it's awesome.
That is awesome. Well, Robyn, again, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. My voice is a little rough and a little congested at times, but I appreciate you having me on and tolerating my gravel speak.
All right, well, make sure to check out proexotics.com and ship your reptiles. All right, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Her Per Parade. Don't forget to subscribe and comment on iTunes. And always, we're on streaming live on herperparade.buzzsprout.com and rossireptiles.com. Her Per Parade.